Before I start, I already did it one, but I'm going to do another picture because I like doing pictures of the audience um, for two reasons. One, I want to remember where I was when I gave this talk, and second, I need to show it to my manager that I actually did this talk, and I see someone is coming. So I'll quickly do the picture, and I know that we have people online, so I just need to know where the camera is, and I'm going to say hi to the people who are online. So welcome to this talk. Before I start, on the first row, there's some flyers and free promotional materials that you can take home after the lecture. So there are like some notebooks, pens, and a fan. Feel free to take them. So welcome to this, I would say short talk. It's not really short, but the main topic will be indeed how to navigate your journey as an author when you write an article. And I assume most of you are PhD students or master students who are wanting to do PhD at some point in your life. So before I go deep into the presentation, I first want to give short overview of what Springer Nature is, because I always get the question, what is the difference between Springer and Nature and BMC and all these different things. So very formally, we are a group of publishers and imprints under the umbrella called Springer Nature. So that includes Springer, Nature, Scientific American, BMC journals. So those are like biomedical journals. Macmillan Education. So if you remember your English learning language books from schools, they're published most of the time by Macmillan. So this is also part of the entire group. So we're just an umbrella organization of multiple publishers that we all work differently. But let's say when it comes to academic publishing and writing articles, the lessons are more or less industry shared. So I'm not going to go into all the commercial details. Just keep in mind that if you see Springer Nature combined, that probably means that you're talking to representative of the same company. All right, so what we're going to do today, it's a lot of things, so prepare. It's going to be a long journey and also a lot of details. So I'm going to start with what is a manuscript and why do we do any manuscripts and why do we even write. Then I'm going to talk about something I refer as a publication strategy. Then some tips and advice on how to select your journal. And then something I call surviving the submission. So it's navigating the submission process when when you submit an article, what to expect and what you can do that can help you. And I'm going to end up with something a bit more serious. I'm going to talk a little bit about research integrity and ethics. And this is the hot topic right now. So I'm going to also talk about how not to use AI when you write your papers. So you already had a short introduction about me. So the one thing I can add to this is that I also did my PhD at the University of Groningen in the Netherlands. So I am an author, I am a reviewer, I was an editor. And of course, like right now, I'm more on the publishing side of the business. So I sympathize you and feel you when you have your questions. So that kind of gives me unique perspective, which means that I understand you as an author, and I also understand you as a publisher. And those are the journals that I manage. So there are about 10 or 11 different journals. Um, and if I have to think in total, those are about 2,000 publications that they don't go through me, but this is what I oversee, about like 2,000 articles every year being published. And this is just a fragment of the civil engineering portfolio. So to give you a perspective, how many papers we're dealing with on an industry level. All right, so I'll start with the manuscript preparation. And I'm not an English language teacher, so don't take all the things that I say as the definitive truths. So they're more based on experience and how I navigated my PhD and partly also my postdoc. And because the question that you always have is, why do we publish? Like, why do we bother? Like, why do we have to do articles? Can't we just do a manuscript? Like, not a manuscript, a monograph and a book and just get it over with. The truth is that articles are the currency of academic community. So, like the more you publish, it's kind of the better for you. but I would say the more quality paper you publish is better for you. So not necessarily every publication that you have is going to be the most cited paper. It's more about learning how to do it properly rather than doing it quick and dirty. Uh, but yeah, so why do we do it? Expand knowledge, gain new insights, network. Go to conference, meet similar souls that do similar research, and last but not least, so this is actually the most important. The function is in the bottom, so I hope you can see that there. It's about establishing your research fingerprint and establishing your research career eventually, because you do a very unique research, so you are the experts in your field, so you know the 1% of what you do. No, so you know the 1% of the field that you're doing, and you are the expert. So I don't know it. So publishing is your way of convincing and communicating what I do is important, and this is why you should read it. So this is the piece of morning wisdom. So the most common challenge for me as an author when I was writing was the article structure. So what do I mean by article structure? It means that when you open a journal or download a paper, you always see that there's introduction, methods, discussion, results, discussion, and so on and so on. Um, and when you communicate normally in spoken English, you don't structure your arguments like that. You just say what you did and what you found. But when you write, it's a bit different. So you have like this structure. And why do we have this structure? Well, the structure we have because it is expected from you to have the structure when you submit a paper. Keep in mind, the people who will read and review your papers were in your seats 20, 30 years ago, sometimes even sooner. So when I talk about structure and what is the ideal structure, it just provides a map for the reader to understand what is the paper about and what will follow, and why they should read this article. And excuse me. And important notice here. So I always had my preferred way of writing, which was just write a lot and then sort out everything afterwards. When you submit an article, the journal that you want to submit to may have very specific rules. So they may want you to focus more on the theory, they may want to focus more on the methodology. So this is all important homework you need to do before you start writing to find out what actually you're where you're submitting to. But when we talk about structure, it really boils down to 4 questions. And this is like, why are you doing, what are you doing, what exactly you do, what did you find out, and how does this matter? And like if you have all these 4 questions, you basically have the skeleton of your manuscript. And I would say you have the skeleton of any type of paper you want to write. And from this on, you can only build. And then the idea is that you actually effectively communicate your research. And if you have the answers of all of these together, you have the very successful beginning of your paper. I know it's a painful process most of the time because you write and you revise and etc. But if you piece all these things together, you have a good skeleton that you can work on, and you can only expand from that. And from experience, I can tell you that, I mean, now I talk up in this in a very structured manner, like, like first introduction, results, methodology. In practice, when you start writing, it is actually really messy because you do your experiments, so you have your results before you have everything else. So for me, this was the writing order. So I would start with describing the data and the results first, because let's be honest, if you do an experiment, the results is not going to change. It's going to be the same result for the 4 years. So even if you do it again, you change the parameters, but then it's a different experiment. So I always did that first. Then it was a little bit hit and miss with doing introduction and discussion because the references you use most of the time, they're also the same. So you already have them, but how you use the literature that you use and how you write the discussion of your results, it's really journal dependent. As I said earlier, sometimes they want you to go deeper in the methods, sometimes they want you to go deeper in the theory. So that was what I was doing after I found the journal that I want to submit to, or let's say the first preferred journal. And again, the last but most important part that I was actually not only doing last, but I was doing maybe like 1 month after I wrote the article, was to think about the title, abstract, and keywords, and this kind of like unique selling points. And why was I doing it in such a distance? Simply because sometimes you need time to understand what you did. And this is, this is my piece of advice. It could be that for you it works differently, but keep in mind that you cannot work on everything at the same time. You have to pick what you work on, and then you go on. So I'm not going to focus on the each section. I just want to focus on abstracts and titles because I know this is the place where a lot of us struggle when we write, because maybe you did an excellent research and you have like this amazing findings, but then you have to write an abstract. And what a lot of people do when they write abstracts is that they go to the article and they really repeat what they did in the article, which is not wrong. But keep in mind that, like there's so many papers being published. For most of the readers, when they look for new articles to read on a specific topic, they will just read the title and the abstract. And if they don't like the abstract, they will just move on to the next journal. So it is important when you work on your abstract to really think about what are the key messages that you want to give. Like, this is what is in one sentence your article about. So this is an element that a lot of people forget to do in their abstracts, but it must be there. So, and the rest is also important, like the background, the relevance, the findings. Of course, it's important, but it's, imagine when you read an abstract and when you don't like the abstract, you also don't read the paper. So it's the same. It's the business card of your article. And by the way, prepare for a lot of QR codes, because every now and then I introduce references that you can use when you work on your articles. So this is one of those references. So it's an article, really old article from 2011. And you would say, oh, Mufti, why do you promote article from 2011? Because it's so old and relevant. Well, it's about writing. It's never irrelevant when it's about writing. So, go out and look for references how to do abstracts, because there are really good tips out there. And okay, not all of them are good, but there are one or two that might be really relevant and you can use throughout your career to write your abstracts. Okay, so the other thing that is important, it's about titles, right? So, and this one is on purpose so colorful, because titles do matter. If you don't like the title, if you don't understand the title, you probably don't understand what the content is about. And I think about 5 to 10% of all the publications we have suffer from the fact that they're really bad titles. It could be amazing research, but if the title is wrong, then you also don't want to read further. So the bottom line for every title is, like simple is better, less is more. So if you can, again, like, in very simple sentence, say, this is what this research is, and those are the findings and why they're relevant, you're there. And here's some examples, of 3 different types of articles, titles, and also articles. And it's also sometimes matters what type of article you're writing. If you're doing like a review article, you can be a little bit more creative in terms of like, what is the main finding of the review, and add it there. If you do more of an exploration article, so as the first one, basically, what does like 10 seconds before the disaster mean? So it's not this. It's a hook for the reader to read more. So if you go into like really long abbreviations and really long methodology explanations, and it's only 10 people in your field will understand it, it's still good for those 10 people, but you would lose the other 20 people that would scan that article. So pay attention to this kind of stuff. And a side remark, academic writing is a skill. So you're not born with it, you learn it the more you do it. So the more the practice, the better you become. And as I said at the beginning, I'm not an academic English writing teacher, so those are just my personal tips. And those are some references that you can use when you write your articles. We as Springer have like some support for authors, but there's more like industry shared references, like the Manchester Academic Phrase Bank. It basically collects phrases that you can use in your article, and you can use them actually with direct copy paste because they're so generic that plagiarism doesn't detect them. And the QR code is my personal tip, so please use them with salt and pepper a little bit. Don't take them as the 100% that it will work for you, but it was more my experience on like what I struggled with when I was writing articles. And again, I'm not a native speaker, so first I had to learn English as a second language, and then I had to learn academic English as a third second language. So it is practice, and it's difficult in the beginning, but it gets better. Okay, so that was about the manuscript and manuscript structure and preparation. I'm going to now spend some time on walking through how to select a journal. And I know that most of you have already made up your mind about the journals that you have. And the most common question that I have in this workshop is like, when do I start journal selection? So when do I start looking for which journal I want to publish? My advice is start as early as possible. Sometimes that is even before you start collecting the data, simply because if you are prepared for what journal you want to publish, it can also help you to build your manuscript. It's not only saving time, but also like mentally prepares you that, hey, this is the journal I aim. And even if I don't succeed with this journal, I get a desk reject, let's say, or like I get rejected after peer review, you already have the article written. So when you go to the next journal, in the case if it's not accepted the first time, then you can just tweak it for the next journal. So have like your preferred journals already in advance. So if you work on bridge maintenance, for example, then you go for the first journal and the second journal and third journal. They're all related in the same field. And if you work in a niche field, most of the time all the journals and editors know each other. So at least your name gets recognized by the editors. Um, um, what to look for? I mean, I already talked about a little bit that every journal has different ways of publishing and different preferred ways of article outline and layout. Some of them prefer the results and discussion separately. Some of them want the discussion and conclusion separately, and then the results. So this is all journal specific. And where do you write this information? Where do you find out what do I do with the figures and tables, and what background I should include in my article? Well, every journal has editorial policy and author submissions. So study these things like religiously, because sometimes it really matters. I have editors that refuse to review papers because they're missing, let's say, 2 or 3 sentence justification on a specific topic that should be included, and it's mentioned in the instructions for authors, but authors just submit blindly without reading it. So that saves you time, also saves you nerves, and saves you some disappointments eventually. Um, and so where do you find journals? And what do you know, like how do you know what to select for the journals? It all starts, I mean, we always say it all starts with you going online, and I know these days everybody just goes and Googles things. So there are multiple indexes and indexing services and online services that you can use. Keep in mind, you can always use your library as well to find journals, because they're the people that know what is out there. Um, uh, the way I found the journals I wanted to publish was simply by talking to the people in my department, in my school. Because when you do your research, you want to be part of a specific community, and then you talk to these people and you ask them, hey, like, where do you publish? Was it difficult? Like, how long did it take? Is the editor actually understanding or not? So there are a lot of like tiny details, because when you only look online, you're just like attracted by impact factor and speed and like how quick they publish and who is the editor in chief, etc. But when you talk to your friends and supervisors and colleagues, you learn a little bit more about the journals. So I always wanted to publish like in the top journal in my field, simply because I found out that my topic that I was working on is not attractive for that journal. I never submitted to that journal because I knew that when I submitted, it will be desk reject because they're not interested in the topic I'm working on. So they were like not only selective, but they were also being, how to say that, not discriminatory. So it's really selective, like selective and allowing only specific topics to be published. So this is you learn from talking to people. So that's why, publishing and writing is a social activity. It's a creative activity, and you can do it on your own, but you can also ask friends for help. Um, so there a lot of sources out there. I'm just sharing one. So if you really want to go deeper into looking for journals online, we have something called Springer Journal Finder, and basically what it is, you can insert some keywords and you can insert the abstract or the title that you have and see what the algorithm will suggest you. I do this every now and then for the articles I published, and surprisingly, it not always suggests the journals where I published. So when you use these tools, like we have one, and our colleagues from other companies also have similar tools, when you use this kind of stuff, use them as a reference. So they're not the definitive truth, because you know your article the best, and if it doesn't fit in a specific journal, but the tool suggests it, doesn't mean that you have to submit there. You can still submit whatever you want. This is just more to give you an idea when you're really stuck. There are multiple ways to recognize a journal and a publisher. I already talked about it. So talk about indexing. Do you recognize the publisher in general? Like if it's a publishing imprint that you have never heard, maybe it's not that good of a publisher. Um, if it's not indexed, and indexing is always like yin and yang a little bit, because not all the journals are indexed at the same level everywhere. So it may be in Scopus, but not in ESCI, or the other way around. So check if it's indexed. Check if you have to pay when you submit the paper. If you have to pay at the submission when you start submitting, then maybe don't go to that journal. And check the board members and editors in chief. Like, do you cite these people? Do you know these people? Like, if you go to conferences and you see them presenting, then it's likely that it's actually an active journal. There are a lot of things to consider. I talked about them already. Something that I didn't talk about is the publishing model, whether it's a hybrid journal or it's an open access journal, or the field it publishes. So if you work on a specific field, like as fire engineering, you can go into like specialized niche journals like fire technology or fire safety. But if you want to contribute more to, let's say, the general civil engineering field, then you can go like to a more broad scope journal that focuses on civil engineering broadly. There are different weights that you need to carry, and this is more into what field you want to contribute. So, if you want to contribute more to your niche field, you go to those journals. If you want to go wide, you go to the broader scope journals, etc. It's all about the audience and all about the board of the journal, let's say. And sometimes they're, like the really top journals. And this is a question I always get: oh, how do I publish in Science, and how do I publish in Nature, and all this stuff. Keep in mind that different journals, they have different audiences. So not everybody reads the community journals, as we call them, the research journals. And so the people that read the scientific journals are more, teachers, professors, and students. So they have the time to read that. So those are a different way of writing and expressing. If you look at the Nature articles, for example, they're very short and very concise. They're very communication style. So, but there's still a lot of research behind it. So consider your audience when you write, because the people that read Nature are most of the time just very busy people that don't have time to read full articles. So yeah, this I can go talking about all day. So I'm just going to cut it here. There are a lot of resources out there where you can identify publishers and identify journals and do a checklist for yourself. This is one of them. This is more or less international academic publisher related checklist that you can do. Um, um, Luckily, this one is not AI generated. It's like, it's manual intelligence. So you need to do your own checklist and mark the items that apply to you. And I want to give one important conclusion to this section when you select a journal. The journal, like your impact, is not as the same as the journal impact factor. Your impact as an author is focusing more on yourself and having a strategy when you publish and when you do your PhD. So let's say you have 3 to 4 years of PhD, and you really have to make a plan on where you're going to publish and how you're going to publish. And okay, not everything goes according to plan, but don't just make your decision based on the journal impact factor. Because as I gave you an example, it might be a perfect impact factor journal, but if it doesn't publish your field of research, then it's perhaps better to find another thing that can give you more impact for your career that can land you to your next destination. All right. So this is a little bit getting to the nitty-gritty. So what happens when you submit an article? So can I see some hands of people who have submitted an article? 1, 2, 3, yeah, 4, 5. Some very shy hands. So those who have done it, you probably have gone through a lot of steps, and um, um, let's say the journey is quite long. This is the very simplified way of the journey. So what people think very often is that, oh, I will upload my article, it will go to the editor will send it to the associate editor. We have one of those in the room today. And then the associate editor will send it to the reviewer, and then the reviewer will give me my feedback, and then I send the feedback back, and I will publish within a month. Not really. Sometimes it works as quick as that. Most of the time, there are multiple checks from the moment you submit to the moment it goes to the editor. There are a lot of like internal technical checks, we call them. And if your article is missing, let's say, a statement of author contribution, or is missing the keywords, or the abstract is too long, it may come back to you and say, someone will say, dear author, thank you very much, but it's too long. Please, add the section or cut the section. And this can go for a very long time. Sometimes everything will be okay. It will go to the editor, but the editor will be too busy to check it. Or the editors, I always say editors are not almighty. They have their editor-in-chief, so they are really senior, but they're not expert in everything. So they will have to, because they're not certain about the topic, it might be very nicely written, but they don't know the specific topic. They will assign it to an associate editor. And then the associate editor will make the judgment yes or no. So maybe the editor-in-chief thinks it's publishable because it's written very nicely. But if the content is not good enough, the associate editor will say no. And then, it's already rejected the second, like on two, not rejected officially, but it goes back to you as a desk reject, saying like, it's a nice article, it doesn't fit in the journal, please try someone else. Let's say if the associate editor assigns a reviewer, sometimes the reviewers are the ones that say, no, it's not good enough, so it goes back, but at least you have your feedback. So there are a lot of multiple things, and what happens very often is that your article gets assigned at least 2 reviewers, and they accept the assignment, but they are too late in delivering the reports. And this is where the delay starts to happen. So, it looks very simple and very like doable, but in real life, this can take 3 or 4 times. My very extreme example is that one of my PhD articles I submitted to Journal A. It was desk rejected because it didn't fit the aims and scope. Went to Journal B. Then it went to peer review. It got rejected. Then it went to Journal C, where I had 3 rounds of peer review. And after the 3 rounds of peer review, it was rejected. I learned a lot about my own research from the reviewers' reports. But so this took maybe about 9 months, the whole process. So prepare for extreme cases. They don't happen, but it can happen. And every time when you submit a paper, remember one thing: editors are busy. They are also human beings. They're professors. They are most of the time department heads. They have families, they have children, they have also parents. So they have very limited time, and they do journal editing. This is a role. They don't get paid for it most of the time. It's a hobby. I mean, you can question what kind of a hobby that is when you read other people's papers and like really get angry when you read them. But when you submit a paper, you are competing with a lot of other people for valuable time of the editors. And so your job as an author is really your article to stand out. So it has to be written not only well, but only when you submit, to be clever about how you submit and where you submit. Maybe you do some networking before you ask, hey, does it fit or not? But some journals also ask for specific things because they want to see that the authors are really committed to that journal. So they ask you to write research highlights. They ask you to do cover letters. They ask you to do even graphical abstracts. So it's not every journal, but there are different rules. Some of them, I have a journal that actually wants all these three elements in one go. And this is a lot of extra work for you as an author, but it feels frustrating when you have to do it because I did the research and now I need to do this, right? But then it gives you a fair advantage when you submit an article because the editor-in-chief is like, okay, so this person really actually made the effort to understand the journal, and let's give them a fair chance. And um, very important when you do this highlights, like this, very fancy things, also in general, pay attention to your tone, your point of view, so how you write it, and the added value. So that's 100% true. And something that I, as a little bit dyslexic person, do a lot is typos. And I made a typo on purpose on the slides because on first sight you don't see it, but this things attract the attention of the editors. If there's a lot of like grammatical errors or like just typos in general, then you're a little bit reserved a little bit when you read that kind of stuff. So it is the small things are sometimes very important. Good. So what do you do when you submit an article? My first tip, celebrate. Like if you have submitted and the editor has assigned reviewers, please go and celebrate. Simply because by the time this journal article will be published, it will be very different articles from the one that you submitted. Because you have to review it, you will receive comments that you disagree. So this is the time to celebrate. Of course, when you publish, you also celebrate. But the initial celebration is just of a relief. The final one is just, it's done. So, and be patient and prepare that, like, as I said, it might be desk rejected and it might be that it will come back to you very quick. The rule of thumb is that if it's a desk reject, you get it within a month, sometimes even shorter, but be patient. And your goal basically is to get your article into the peer review process. And why do I say that is the goal? Because this is where you get external comments on what you did and how to improve it. There are different types of peer review. I'm not going to go into detail, but the idea of the peer review process is that, as I said, you are getting feedback on your work. And sometimes you disagree with the feedback. Sometimes the reviewers are also not 100% sure what you do. But there are like different types of peer review. There's the single blind peer review, where the reviewers know that you're the author. So if a journal says single blind peer review, that means that when you submit your article, the reviewer will see who you are. You will never see who they are. That's the rule. I mean, unless they cite a lot of the same references, then you know who this person is. But I'll talk about it later. There's double blind peer review, and this was the standard in my field. All the articles I submitted, they went through double peer review, sometimes even triple blind peer review. So nobody knew who each other was. And there's another type of peer review that usually applies for um, some of the open access journals. It's like called open peer review, where everybody knows everyone. You know who the reviewer is, and the reviewer knows who you are. So it's more based on trust. And talking about trust, peer review is actually based most of the time on trust. Like you trust other people to give comments, and like the other way around. That being said, it's supposed to be a constructive process. You're supposed to receive comments that will improve your feedback and relevant comments, and like that advance your writing skills and your manuscript. In real life, it's just this: you are this person, and accepted is there, and there's like a lot of um, let's say battlefields and battles that you need to make, and sometimes there's a reviewer that doesn't really understand your work, or sends you like 2 pages of feedback, um, and you need to like understand what that feedback means. Um, to me, the first time I submitted a paper, it's an anecdote. I got my feedback. I revised the submission, and I sent it back to the editor, saying like, "Oh, dear editor, dear reviewers, thank you very much. We appreciate your comments. We accepted all your comments. Here's the new article." I didn't provide anything else. The editor-in-chief just returned immediately the paper to me, saying, "Can you please provide a report on what you did?" Like what the changes are. So those are the most common mistakes that everybody does. Is like, oh, we did everything. Please check the paper. What in reality the reviewers and editors are actually looking for is like, like where did you make the revisions? Why did you make the revisions? It's refer to page and etc. If you have a very difficult reviewer that basically sends you a lot of mean comments, and you don't know how to deal with that or suggest things that you didn't do, just say, hey, like, we appreciate this, but maybe this is not for this article. Like, we really understand why you give us this feedback, but we didn't really do this. We did this, and you say what you did. And sometimes this is enough. Like, sometimes the reviewer will be like, okay, I'm happy with the comments. Um, so, you know, clearly discuss everything you did, even the things that you didn't do, because this is what people are looking at. And you know, it's you basically want the editor and the reviewer to have all the information, and if they have all the information actually delivered to them, and you know, the reviewer is happy, the editor is happy, you are happy, your supervisor is happy, you are this person. You are just accepted and published, and you can go and really celebrate like more this time. And and if you think that everything finishes here, it's actually not true. So as I said, this is your career, this is your research, so you have to really promote what you did. And I know my experience when I was a PhD, it was like, oh, I have a paper, and I'll just put it on LinkedIn and let it go, and nothing will happen. But if you don't really promote it actively, and you know, don't talk about it or don't do anything with it, it just stays there online as one of the millions of papers that we publish every year. So it's really important to sell yourself. Um, and I mean, it sounds wrong, I know, but it's really important to like really put your face and your being out there in the physical and online uh, audiences and say, this is my article and this is important. So really promote it and use different things. And I know these days people feel restricted when they have to share articles. Don't be, because it's actually you as authors are allowed to share articles. And I'm going to share just one way of doing it we have. So when you publish at Springer, at any Springer journal, at the bottom of the page, you would have the site, like the citing information, and there will be also another one said get shareable link. It's a terrible thing to pronounce. Get shareable link. And then when you get this link, what the web page will do, it will generate a shareable PDF which you can send to anyone. The person will not be able to download the PDF unless they have access, but they will be able to read the PDF whenever they want. This is the service that we have at Springer. I know that there are multiple services out there. Sometimes you also author also get a specific link that you can share. Really be share and be active, because I always say you're the future of research, you're the future of your field, and then you really need to get it going and continuing. Okay, so this was all the fun stuff, all the practical stuff. Now I'm going to go a little bit into more serious topic that's about research integrity. Um, why is it important to talk about research integrity? Well, because I think as a publishers, as authors, as editors, as reviewers, we have a lot of responsibility to explain, like, to the new generations, like, how are things done, how they were done in the past, and where are we going at. Um, and I know different countries and different institutions, different regions, they have different approach to research integrity. So, I mean, I'm based in the Netherlands, so my research had to be approved by an ethics committee. Um, Although I had nothing to do with unethical treatment of my subject, simply because I had to talk to elderly people and people who don't speak English as a first language. I had to get all this vetting and approved before I started doing my research. The same more or less applies when you write an article. So I'm talking to engineering scholars, so most of the time you don't need to get permission from the material to do experiments with the material, but it becomes really important when you start preparing the manuscript. And it's research integrity is important because we adhere to rules. So if something is not according to the rule, you may get into trouble, your supervisor may get into trouble, the journal where you publish may get into trouble. And so there's a lot of things that can go wrong. We had a very nice discussion last night about like whose responsibility it is actually research integrity. So this is more the approach we have at Springer. So we try to share it between the different stakeholders we have involved. Um, I would say as an author, the main responsibility is always yours. So you have to ensure that what you're writing and publishing is not only relevant, but it's accurate. So you don't, fabricate data. But so it is also like the editors and the publishers, and like there's a lot of it's a very complicated scheme. So when I talk about research integrity, so today I'm going to talk more on the Springer side and more on my like how we do see things at Springer. But those are also a little bit industry shared insights when it comes to international academic publishing. And I say this because I know that in some countries, like the responsibilities are shared differently. Um, okay, so I'm going to talk about some common issues in publishing, and those common issues are taken from the so-called Committee on Publication Ethics, which is the umbrella organization that oversees the ethics. Well, it does not oversee, but it gives an advice to the majority of the publishers on the research integrity topics and the ethics topics. Um, I'll start. By the way, I'm going to talk only to 3 or 4 about the 12 subjects that I have. So if you have questions about this later, you can come back to me. So I'll start with authorship. And who is an author? Um, Ideally, an author is basically people who are really involved in your research, who are really involved in the article. And most of the time, that is you, your supervisor, maybe a professor who is involved in your research somehow. If you used like help of a lab technician, so in medical field, they also add lab technicians. So in terms of who is an author, it's really who made substantial contributions to the manuscript. I know that sometimes we are asked to add names in our when you write an article. If that situation happens to you, please make sure that all the agreements are there, that you agree on who the authors are from the beginning. Let's say you have a publication plan, and then you say, okay, on the second paper it will be me, my professor, professor from the other department, and then at some point, if the professor from the other department says, oh, we should really include this other person, just get an agreement in one way or another that those are the authors and this is what their contributions would be. Why is this important? This is important because if something goes wrong, you have your safety net. Because now, as publishers, when you submit an article, we do ask about the contributions of all the authors listed. Who did what? Who did the methodology? Who did the writing? Who did, if there were extra experiments, like who helped with the experiments? Because if that gets troublesome, you also have like schools where at your school probably there's a contact person that you can ask for this kind of stuff. But really get the authors in the right order from the beginning, because what in practice happens a lot, I receive a paper, well, the editor-in-chief receives a paper, it goes to peer review, and then it's a young PhD student who doesn't realize that actually there has to be like an extra name there. So we get correction on the authors list. And in 90% of the time, we reject those corrections simply because there's not enough evidence that the new added name actually added any information to the article. So get this right from the beginning. Like don't rush into submit. Just really do your homework into like how you organize the authors, who are the who is first, who is last, who is in the middle, and so on. And as I said, like changes to authorships are getting more difficult to get approved. It was easier a couple of years ago, but now it's just, I think in several journals, including Fire Technology, we are adopting the approach, okay, you submitted with these authors, unless there's additional experiment needed and you needed this person to do that experiment, we're not going to grant you a new author to be listed. So check this, again, this is all about editorial policies and you doing your homework. Check this in advance so you actually don't have any trouble when you do that. You can find this information on the webpage, but you can also just very frankly email the editor-in-chief and ask them, hey, this is the situation. What do you advise me to do? Editor-in-chiefs are also human beings, and they like to help. Also associate editors in that regard. Okay, the second very big trouble that we always get is duplicate submissions and plagiarism. So those are 2 in 1. So there are 2 topics that I synthesize in one. So what is a duplicate submission? Duplicate submission is when you have a manuscript and you submit it to multiple journals at the same time. Um, that is simply not allowed because, as I said, like it's a trust-based community, and all the publishers, and that's the silly thing that authors don't know. Most of the publishers, academic publishers, we have it's not a shared database, but it is some sort of a tool that points to us at some point if given submission has been submitted to multiple journals. It usually takes within for a month for the data to be updated. But recently we had a case where someone submitted the same article with the same authors into 17 different journals in different publishers. And the way we found out it was a bit silly. It was a case where I got an email from another editor-in-chief saying, hey, like I was invited as a reviewer for another journal to review this paper, and now I received it in my journal. So what's going on? And then we investigated, and it was really like, it's waste of time, the bottom line. Like it's waste of time of the editors, of the reviewers, it's waste of your time. And I understand people get frustrated sometimes, and like you wait too long, and then you submit to another journal. If you really cannot wait and want to submit to another journal, please withdraw first at the first journal and then submit to another one, because in that case, it's not really duplicate anymore. You just withdraw and send again. Same applied if it's a rejected article. So, if it's a desk reject or reject after peer review, and then you do changes, and you send to another journal, it's legally not a duplicate. The editor-in-chief sometimes may decide that it's a duplicate, but it's up to you to say basically, yes, we submitted to journal A, but it was rejected and went to journal B. It's the same with plagiarism. So plagiarism, I don't need to explain what plagiarism is. You all know it. But those are all checks that are being done on every submission. So if the benchmark is too high, the article will automatically go back to you saying like, sorry, not enough contribution, not original. If the editor is in a good mood, he also can give you like the percentage of the plagiarism match. There's also something called text recycling, which is not really plagiarism, but let's say you're using your own previous work that you already published. So it's a gray zone. It's like with plagiarism, you cannot really definitely say all the time it's a self-plagiarism. Is not, because sometimes you use the same methods and materials, so that doesn't change. So that is a bit different. But if your results and theory and everything is the same, then it becomes a little bit on the plagiarism on the higher end of the spectrum. So those are, by the way, those are like the traditional challenges. So I have a little bit of information on like current challenges in research integrity. And as I promised, this is where I talk about AI, because I know everybody uses different versions of large language models. So Springer and also all the other major publishers have very strict policies on use of AI. This is a new field. It will be a new field for a couple of years up until we have any set rules. So things like ChatGPT, Copilot, DeepSeek, and so on, they cannot be authors. I mean, that's clear, because it also is very weird when you put like, ChatGPT 2002. So that cannot be author. I always say my personal advice is use it only when you really struggle with fixing a sentence, one sentence, and not entire paper, and not entire paragraph, and not entire section. Just a sentence, like say, please fix this sentence. That's maybe it's in the allowed zone, but if you use it in any capacity, like to help you analyze the data, to help you, fix keywords and abstracts and etc., please document this and also report it in either acknowledgements. Well, it's weird to acknowledge ChatGPT, but it's why I'm saying this. In one of these workshops last month, one of the audience members came to me and said, "Oh, actually, I feel very embarrassed because I used ChatGPT to improve my abstract." So this person put the entire abstract in ChatGPT, and it generated a very nice, fancy abstract. But the paper came back to her with a question mark. Excuse me, dear person, did you actually use any large language model in this article? And this person didn't know what to do. They were basically paralyzed. And they were very honest and said, yes, we used it for language editing. So for language editing, you don't need to declare it, but you have to be very careful because the way these models are generating sentences and words, we have detection mechanisms that actually can tell us the likelihood of this author using any of the language models is 80 to 90%, and that's very high percentage. So you really be careful with this. And images generated by AI are, generally speaking, not permitted. There are some exceptions, but the exceptions are more into um, when you use already existing image that you own to highlight some stuff. And we also tell our peer reviewers not to upload their manuscripts in any models. We cannot control that, as we cannot control authors submitting their articles to this large language models. But so those are more or less the 100, not 100%, but like the strict rules that we have. And the bottom line is that if you decide to use it, you will probably be caught one way or another. Not maybe in an early stage, but later stage. And the same with the reviewers. A review generated by a large language model most of the time is very neutral and very positive and doesn't add any critical insights. And it's the same with the papers. So if you submit, not submit, if you ask any of the models to revise a paper, it will make your paper very bland, like very middle of the road. So it will not really stand out either. So bottom line, please don't do it. The second thing that is recent and relevant, and probably some of you may have been exposed to it, we call them paper mills. And paper mills are technically organizations. We call them organizations, but it's maybe one or two people. That it's a network of people who actually offer authorships for sale, and they offer even sometimes to write the papers for you on your behalf. And you can pay to be an author. And depending on whether you're first author, second author, third author, 11th author, there are different rates. So it starts like from like 100 and goes like to 2,000 sometimes. So they claim that they actually offer legitimate services, and sometimes they have really nice web pages where you can buy a publication, as I said, buy a place in an article. What in reality happens is that you may pay money into something that, of course, it's in the gray zone, and you just lose your money, and these people have a nice life. And I mean, in this case, they go to such an extent that they also have like the journals that they work with. I can tell you they don't work with these journals. Like they just like this is really phishing attempt. So like it's really like tempting you to use their services because they also promise a quick publication turnaround. Most of the time we catch them and we actually remove the papers from submission, and it's also like the authors are being monitored afterwards on what they do. And why are paper mills such a big problem? Simply because those type of people, those type of organizations, they know how to manipulate the peer review process. They know how to manipulate the journals, let's say. And if Clarivate or Scopus or we find that something is irregular, this most of the time leads not only to papers being removed and retracted, but also the journals being delisted from the indexing services. And assume you didn't use this service, but like someone used a lot of it, and then it's a specific journal, and then the whole journal is delisted. That also affects your career as an honest researcher, because suddenly you published in this like really impactful journal that is not listed anywhere. So this is, just be alert, be out there. If you see it, just send it to me just as a joke, like, oh, I found one. I get every week another screenshot of authorship for sale. So this is how intensive this is. So yeah, just for you to know that it's out there and just to be aware. And please also, again, do not use it. Okay, so I get like to the more complicated one, and I already talked about this in the peer review process. So sometimes you would get in your peer review report a lot of references from the same person. Most of the time, this is what we called self-citation. So this is just a very small fraction of, no, not self-citation. It's um, citation stacking. So that will be someone who asks that you actually cite a lot of their research. But this is just like the bottom of the pyramid. It gets like worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. If you're in a situation where you receive a reviewer report where there are a lot of references that either don't make sense, or as in you didn't work on the field, or they're out of your field, or it's the same reference all over again, please report this to the editor-in-chief so he can take action. And most of the time we remove those references, or we just tell you, please do not pay attention to this. But this happens fairly often. And the effect is as the same as the first two, that if it happens too much, it basically damages the journal and damages the reputation of the journal, also damages your reputation. Funny anecdote, I'm going to make this a little bit less serious. As a PhD scholar, when you do your fifth paper, you're very tempted to cite your previous papers. Because it's the same field that you worked on and it's the same references. You can do it. It's not that scary. What I'm talking about here is, let's say you have a publication and there are not 90, there are 49 references, and 35 of the references are to the same authorship group or the same author. So this is what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about like 1, 2, 3, or 5 references, which is you or your supervisor group. I'm talking about a really systematic, long list of this kind of behavior. So you can cite your own articles. That's not a problem. Just don't cite the same 25 articles in the same article all the time. Okay, so that was a bit the tough part. I think I'm sort of. I will finish up in a bit. Just want to summarize after today, and I think this is the moment where you take pictures and the QR code, and I'll say why. Because it's the whole point of today was like how to start writing a paper and to be prepared about the things that's going to happen. And as authors, I know is that we always struggle how to structure an argument, how to make a paper. So this is a reference I used also during my PhD, where we did it in a writing workshop, which I joined. And the idea was really to force yourself when you start working on your manuscripts, also on your thesis, by the way, to really like think. It's a writing exercise to really think about there are 8 questions, but there are actually 14 questions at least. To like really what to focus on and use this as a reference when you write your paper. Because it's important, as I said, the title, who the authors are, what is the journal, who are the readers, are you going to do industry paper, or are you going to do like more methodology paper, more theory paper? What is the question? I didn't talk about, by the way, about research question and what answers it will provide. This is something you discuss with your supervisors, the research question and everything. And number 6 is very important. If you had like one sentence to summarize what it is, and then the rest is just what I talked about, introduction, methodology, and so on, and what remains unresolved, because especially the last one provides you with the reference to, okay, this is what I did, and this is I couldn't find out, but I'm going to do it in the next research. So if you go out there and let's say find 2 or 3 really good articles that you want to use throughout your career as a reference point, you would see that they always finish with like, oh, this is this is what we did, this is what we found out. We're a bit disappointed that we couldn't find out this aspect, but we will do it in the future. So it's really good to write with questions when you write, and also good to, because this is eventually gonna help also build your argument. And it's your research matters, and you always publish with a purpose. And I talk about integrity, so you always adhere to integrity. And it's a bit of a hopeful wording here. Like you're the bright minds that will publish and work in the future. So that is the important part. And and I hope from what you heard today, there's some lessons that you can take home. There's some lessons that you can use, so you can actually like hit the jackpot next time when you submit. So it's submits and accepts in one go without rejection. So yeah, Thank you very much. I have another code. If there are any questions or feedback, we have also the QR code, which is for feedback on the sessions. So thank you very much for your attention. And let me see. Thank you very much for your attention. Yeah, those are also the something I didn't mention. I prepared this presentation together with two of my colleagues. So I also added all our contact names in case you have any questions afterwards. Thank you very much.